Hey, good morning, everybody. Looks like there's still a lot of people coming in. We'll just give it like a couple seconds while we admit the last few people in the lobby. Feel free to put your name and organization in the chat, and we'll go ahead and get started a while. Welcome to DDAP's Technical Assistance webinars. Before I get started, I'm going to read the wiretap information. So again, please feel free to put your name and organization in the chat a while, and I'll go ahead and read the wiretap. It's in accordance with the wiretap law. It is against the law in Pennsylvania to record oral conversations without the permission of folks involved in most circumstances. This session is being recorded for training and/or record-keeping purposes. By participating in this session, you are consenting to the recording, retention, and use of this session. So at any time, if you have a question or comment, please feel free to place that in the chat and we'll respond to you as soon as possible. If you'd like to ask your question or comment verbally, please note that by doing so, you are consenting to the recording, retention, and use of your statements recorded as part of this session. So please exit the call now if you don't want to be recorded, and you'll be able to review the video in its entirety on the DDAP webpage following this event. Give it 1 second. Great, so we're just admitting everybody from the lobby. Good morning. Please feel free to put your name and organization in the chat, and we will go ahead and get started. So today's session is rooted in DDAP's initial alignment review process. Everything we'll cover today, admission criteria, treatment planning, service expectations, are foundational elements to support any oversight process tied to the ASAM criteria. We're going to walk through some common gaps that we've seen in past infrastructure reviews or initial alignment reviews, share some examples and highlight tools that are already available to you. As a reminder, alignment with the ASAM criteria 2013 edition is required of drug and alcohol treatment providers. Any questions you have regarding the webinar can be typed in the chat, and following the presentation in a Q&A, we will provide a Q&A to the participants and post to the website at a later date. On the screen are today's presenters. We're members of the DDAP Division of Evaluation and Improvement section. 3 of us today will be providing the information. Christy Martirano is also a member of our team, and she's helping in the background. Amanda is going to ask a couple poll questions this morning.
Good morning, everyone. First, our usual question, tell us your role: executive director, clinical supervisor, counselor, administration, medical staff, support staff, case manager, DDAP, SCA, or MCO. If you're unable to see the poll on the screen, feel free to put your role in the chat.
Looks like 120 responses, 122 responses. 24. Thanks everybody for participating in that. We have a couple more, so we'll move on to the next poll.
How comfortable are you with writing a policy aligned with the ASAM criteria? Very comfortable, somewhat comfortable, neither comfortable nor uncomfortable, somewhat uncomfortable, very uncomfortable.
Take your time. We'll give this a couple more seconds. 117 responses so far. This really helps us in knowing where individuals are with writing policies. It helps us to create material and plan. Mostly somewhat comfortable, but looks like it's a range. So thank you very much, everybody. The full question.
3, how well do you think your current policies are aligned with your practices? Extremely well, somewhat well, neutral, somewhat not well, extremely not well.
Like we have various responses. Thanks, everybody. This is very helpful. Yeah, and even if you don't handle policies, it's okay. This can still apply to you today. All right, we'll go ahead and move on. So here's our learning objectives for today, and I'll let you go ahead and read that on the screen. And admittedly, we know this content isn't the most thrilling today, but it is packed with information that can really help you provide and strengthen your program's foundation and avoid surprises during reviews. And hopefully you'll find the content helpful. There's whether you already, do a great job or whether you need some assistance. I think it's a good reminder as well for providers and just how to keep your policy aligned with your practice. So before we begin, I'll briefly revisit how we got here and what today's session is all about. We're going to build on DDAP's experience conducting initial reviews for 2.5 and 3.7 levels of care. Our goal is to assist with common system level gaps and provide practical guidance to help providers align their policies and procedures with daily operations. This information applies across the full continuum, not just those 2 levels of care. The content we're discussing can also be used as a primer for the upcoming ambulatory reviews that we talked about last month. Everything we share today is intended as guidance and suggestions only. The examples provided are only that, examples, and may not fully satisfy licensing requirements, case management expectations, and clinical services requirements under the Bureau of County Program Oversight, or specific requirements of all of the payers. This information does not replace the guidance provided by your behavioral health managed care organization under the 11 and 15 waiver demonstration. Just wanted to make sure that we make that very clear. DDAP began laying the foundation or the groundwork in March of 2017 when DDAP announced its plan to transition to the nationally recognized ASAM criteria 3rd edition to guide assessment, service planning, and level of care placement. As of January 1st of 2022, all substance use treatment providers in Pennsylvania were expected to be aligned with the ASAM criteria. Vicky's going to take it's going to later on talk about the tools available to you on DDAP's ASAM resources page. And we want to clarify DDAP's role in conducting initial reviews. There's a lot of different reviews and oversight going on here, and we realize that. The initial reviews that the DDAP team conducts are specifically for providers offering level 2.5 or 3.7 services and who plan to contract with a single county authority, behavioral health managed care organization, or receive federal funds. To support providers in meeting these expectations, our initial reviews primarily examine infrastructure, things like policies, procedures, and supporting documentation that demonstrate alignment with the ASAM criteria. So providers who have not participated in a review for these two levels of care can initiate that process and be considered for DDAP's public-facing list by emailing our ASAM resource account, and our team will follow up with you with a checklist of documentation required to begin that process. It's important to reiterate, this review does not take the place of the more comprehensive 11 and 15 waiver reviews conducted by your BIMCO. Our goal is to help providers strengthen their foundation to prepare for those reviews and any future alignment review. Okay, so before we dive in, just a quick note, we recently went through a platform redesign of our website. So the ASAM resources webpage may look a little bit different if you've visited it in the past. This is a snapshot of the ASAM resources page. It's structured as one long column on the site. It's in 3 columns here on the screen. We've added arrows here to highlight where you can find the public-facing list, which is right here, under which treatment facilities in Pennsylvania have been reviewed for the ASAM criteria. And also there's some direct links here. These should be live links that you can access at this point if you would like to. Past webinars can be found up here on the top right-hand corner. So all of the webinars that we've had since, I believe, 2021 should be able to be found here at this link. And Vicky's going to go over additional resources later in the presentation. Here's a closer look at one of the public-facing lists that we've been discussing. After completing an initial alignment review for levels 2.5 and 3.7, providers are placed on one of these lists to show they completed that initial review. So while our preliminary reviews focus specifically on providers delivering services at levels 2.5 and 3.7, the guidance we're sharing today applies much more broadly. This webinar is designed to assist you at any level of care to strengthen your infrastructure, particularly the alignment between what's written in policy and what's happening in the practice. Examples we're showing today are grounded in what we've seen during 2.5 and 3.7 reviews, but the takeaways are relevant to providers at all levels of care. In fact, this principle is central to every oversight process, whether it's DDAP monitoring, licensing, MCO reviews under the 11 and 15 waiver, or even internal quality improvement. So now that we've clarified what DDAP's preliminary infrastructure reviews are and how they differ from the 11 and 15 waiver reviews, let's shift to the heart of what we're looking at, what we're actually looking for during those reviews. So this slide is why alignment between infrastructure and practice matter. And the message here is if it's in your policy, it should be in your practice. And if it's in your practice, it should be in your policy. Policy sets the standard, practice brings it to life. Why? Because infrastructure reviews access both what is written, your policies and procedures, and what is documented in action, which are your daily operations. When those two are not aligned, it raises questions during reviews and ultimately increases risk. So our goal is to support you pinpointing and eliminating those misalignments before a review so you're confidently delivering consistent compliant services that reflect your documentation. We're going to walk through some common gaps we've seen in past infrastructure reviews, share examples, and highlight tools already available to you. We keep using this term infrastructure. So just to break it down a little bit, in the context of ASAM criteria and quality of care, infrastructure is the foundation that allows care to happen the right way, consistently and in alignment with expectations. It's not just what's written in a policy manual, it's what's in place. The systems, documentation, training, staff, responsibilities, referral processes, and workflows that support real-world delivery. When infrastructure is strong, it builds consistency, it reduces risk, and makes compliance more manageable. When it's weak or incomplete, even well-intentioned providers can fall out of alignment or miss important steps in care delivery. So as we talk about policy, remember, a strong infrastructure is not just about compliance, it's about making sure your written procedures truly support what needs to happen in practice. That's the bridge between quality care and consistent and accountable service delivery. All right, now that we've talked about what infrastructure means and why alignment matters, let's turn to how you can write policies that support that alignment. The 7 steps that we're about to share are meant as a guide, whether you're creating something new or refining an existing policy. It's what is written that so what is written reflects actually what is practiced. I'm sorry. So yeah, that's what we're trying to ensure, that what is written reflects what is actually practiced. And these 7 steps aren't pulled from one single source. We've drawn from a range of best practices and compliance standards across behavioral health and regulatory bodies to create a practical, straightforward approach. They guide practice, hold up under review, and support consistent service delivery. So we'll start with number 1. The first step is to start with the purpose. What is the goal of this policy? If you're writing a policy, what is the goal? Is it to ensure timely assessments? Is it to clarify service expectations? Starting with a clear purpose helps keep the policy grounded and aligned with the intended function. Then define who is responsible. Use roles, not names. Step 3, define is where you spell out what must happen. Be clear about the specific procedures, expectations, and standards. Remember, vagueness creates problems during reviews. Next, reference any applicable standards. If you're aligning with ASAM, say that explicitly. This clarifies the intent. Then state when the action needs to happen, whether it's 24 hours from admission or updated monthly. Reviewers will look for this alignment between timeline and documentation. Step 6, include documentation expectations. If something needs to be in the record, your policy should say so. For example, a policy might say assessment results must be documented in the individual's file and signed by the clinician. Step 7 ties everything together. Make sure the policy reflects what actually happens in practice. So this is where you check for disconnects. If staff aren't doing what's written, either the policy needs to be updated or the workflows need to be adjusted. So I'm going to hand it over to Vicki now to discuss admission criteria.
Awesome. Thank you, Gloria, and good morning, everybody. So as we mentioned earlier, policy and practice should be unified. Your policies are going to set the framework to ensure that quality care is provided to the individuals that you serve. So when conducting reviews, one of the first areas that QI will focus on is on a facility's admission criteria. Okay, so many of you may already be aware of what we mean when we reference dimensional admission criteria. For those of you who may be newer to the field, or if you ever need to refresh your memory, in the glossary of the text, you can find many of the definitions for the terms that we reference. So on page 418, the ASAM defines dimensional admission criteria by stating the following. To be eligible for admission to each level of care, a person must meet required specifications in an indicated number of the assessment dimensions. So more simply put, a dimension is a term used in the text to refer to one of the 6 biopsychosocial areas that must be assessed in making a service or placement decision. So on this slide, we've broken out the 6 dimensions of the ASAM criteria. For some levels of care, like level 1 outpatient, 3.1 clinically managed low intensity residential, and 3.5 clinically managed high intensity residential, all of the dimensions must be met to be admitted to that level of care. But in other levels of care, like 2.1 intensive outpatient, 2.5 partial hospitalization program, and 3.7 medically monitored intensive inpatient, there's a combination of dimensions that could be met. So this is what we mean when we reference dimensional drivers. The criteria for these dimensions will also differ by level of care. So just because 2.5 or 2.1 services both require that dimensions 2 and 3 be met, as well as at least one of dimensions 4, 5, or 6, that doesn't mean that the criteria that indicates that an individual meets that dimension is the same for both levels of care. So let's put that into context. In dimension 3, for both of those levels of care, an individual's emotional, behavioral, or cognitive conditions are mild to moderate in severity, with the potential to distract from recovery efforts. But in level 2.1, the symptoms will only be monitored, whereas in level 2.5, those symptoms will be stabilized. Excuse me. So on the next slides, we're going to utilize the 7 steps to focus on specific areas to include in your policy, using 3.7 medically managed intensive inpatient services as our example level of care. So one of the first questions that facilities should ask themselves is whether their admission decisions are following their policy, and are those policies congruent with the ASAM criteria. So for the purpose of this TA, we're going to be overall broad and identify bare minimum standards that you'll want to include in your policy, but you'll also want to include any additional information which is pertinent to your admission process. So using the 7 steps, your policy will start with a purpose. So for an admission policy, the purpose may be reflective of the admissions that you plan to take, and try to be as specific as possible. It should also incorporate information for each level of care that you're providing. This also may be an area to identify any specialty populations that you wish to serve. So that could be pregnant women, women with children, adolescents or young adults, older adults, LGBTQIA, just to name a few. So in our example here, ABC facility identifies they provide substance use disorder treatment to adults, specifying that this is adults, both male and female, over the age of 18. And it further identifies that those individuals have a substance use disorder, as well as a physical health or a psychiatric condition, which is going to require they have 24-hour nursing supervision. So next, we're going to want to identify who's responsible for ensuring the policy is followed. In our example, we're identifying the medical director and the admissions coordinator as responsible for overseeing the admission process and ensuring that admissions are timely and appropriate. If you have a larger facility, your definition of who's responsible may be a little bit more expansive. And then just again, to reiterate, the quick tip would be to use titles rather than names. And this avoids any cumbersome policy updates with any staffing changes. So next, we're going to want to identify what must happen. So this is an area to outline the levels of care you provide and to include those dimensional drivers we just talked about, which reflect those levels of care. So this might also be an area where you're going to identify any exclusionary criteria as well. So in our example here, we define the dimensional drivers for 3.7 level of care. The individual must meet 2 of the 6 dimensions, and at least one of those dimensions must be dimension 1, 2, or 3. And then we also provide an overview of those dimensions. You're also going to want to make sure that your overview of the dimensions is as tailored as possible. This is going to demonstrate authorship of your policy as well as your program. Okay, so next reference any applicable standards, including any additional parameters you may have for your funders or your regulators. In our example, we're referencing the use of the ASAM criteria 3rd edition text, which also includes the dimensional drivers as well as the risk ratings. And then clarifying when it must happen may include any hours of operation, admission timeframes for both routine admissions or after-hour admissions, as applicable for 24-hour levels of care. And we're going to want to include the timeframes for reviewing, referrals from outside agencies. This may also include the ability to provide individuals transportation to or from your facility. And finally, we're going to want to include any relevant documentation steps for your facility and funders, and identify processes to ensure that the policy is being applied appropriately. So ensuring it reflects actual practice is an area where you will most be able to ascertain if your policy is in fact driving your practice and procedures. So in our example here, we identified the use of the ASAM summary sheet and our facility's electronic health record to document the admission process, as well as identify if there is going to be any random auditing of the charts monthly. So we also wanted to identify the supervision expectations to ensure that this is an ongoing routine practice at ABC facility. Before we get into a couple of the example policies, I just wanted to stop and highlight the importance of reading the text for each level of care that you provide. In reference to the dimensional admission criteria, there might be different standards for direct admission to a level of care or admission where an individual is transferring in from a higher or lower level of care. So at the end of the slide deck, we will be providing page numbers related to the text and other resources for your reference. Okay, so let's look at a policy example of, a weaker policy. So why do we consider this to be a weak example of a policy? Firstly, it's vague, doesn't provide much information about the targeted population or the type of service. It also doesn't specify the level of care and could be confusing for both staff and referral resources to know if this is a 3.7 provider or a 4.0 provider, since both of them are considered to be both medical and residential. It also doesn't provide any information about what standard of care must be met to be admitted to this level of care, nor does it identify who's in charge of overseeing the admission process or provide any relevant information about how admissions occur. And I will apologize in advance. The next slide is going to be very dense. So on this slide, we're putting the 7 steps from the previous slides together. We provide a clearer image of the who, what, where, when, and how of the admission process. So why do we consider this policy to be stronger than the policy on the previous slide? First, we're providing an identified population to be served. Next, we specify the level of care we plan to provide, as well as the hours of admissions, when they'll be taken, and who's responsible for ensuring that the policy is followed in practice. For facilities who are providing multiple levels of care, you're going to want to include a dimensional driver section for each of those levels of care. But for the purpose of this TA, we just focused on one level of care for each example. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Gloria.
Thank you, Vicki. We're going to take a closer look at Section A of Level 2.5 services under support systems: medical, psychiatric, psychological, laboratory, and toxicology services. If your program operates at a different level of care, this approach is still transferable. Just reference the ASAM criteria language for that level and follow the same process. We noticed many of the infrastructure reviews we conduct often miss Section A, so we focused on that, and we're not covering emergency services or direct affiliations in this session. That said, the strategy that we're using applies just as easily to those areas. And also, I also want to note that we are using policies as examples. So in some cases, when you are going to be under review for whether it's an initial infrastructure review or an 11 and 15 waiver, just note we're using policies as examples because we put these 7 steps together. But if the ASAM doesn't specifically require a policy or a formal policy, you must have some sort of documentation. So that could be written in the form of a policy or a procedure or a workflow or something of that nature. But it does need to be somehow documented so that you can provide documentation in your infrastructure review. So moving on, ASAM's 2.5 criteria specify that providers must ensure access to a range of support services. That's medical, psychological, psychiatric, laboratory, and toxicology through consultation or referral. Psychiatric and other medical consultation must be available by phone within 8 hours and in person within 48 hours or sooner if needed. And I want to take a second here and clarify that we're talking specifically about level 2.5 services, not 2.1. The expectations around psychiatric and medical consultation differ slightly at this level. We've spoken to quite a few providers who haven't had the opportunity to really dig into the criteria. So I want to stress the importance of knowing, just like what Vicki said, knowing what the expectations are for whatever level of care that you're providing. Even though these services don't have to be delivered on site, providers must be able to demonstrate that access is in place. That's what we strongly recommend. That's why we strongly recommend that you have internal policies and procedures outlining how these services are coordinated, who is responsible, and how access is documented. So we'll take a look at what that could look like in a policy. Begin with step one. And that is the purpose. In this case, the purpose is to ensure timely and appropriate access to medical, psychological, psychiatric, laboratory, and toxicology services for individuals receiving 2.5 services in accordance with the ASAM criteria's third edition. And step two is to define who is responsible. Here, the policy should clearly name roles, not just job titles, but the actual responsibilities. Clinical and supervisory staff in this case are responsible for coordinating access to these services. Step three, describe what must happen. Policy should describe the process for ensuring support services are available. For 2.5, that means medical and psychiatric consultation is available by phone within 8 hours and in person. Available by phone within 8 hours and in person within 48 hours through formal referral or affiliative agreements. It also means psychological, lab, and toxicology services are accessible when clinically necessary. We will have this slide deck posted on our webpage. Hopefully, in the next couple of days. Our goal is by the end of the week. So yes, we won't email this out to everybody, but we'll provide them on your webpage under the webinar for this month. Step 4 references the standards related to the policy. So here we use the ASAM criteria. You may also reference regulatory or payer standards that apply. We didn't do this here because we didn't want to add any confusion to the policy, but we've stuck with just the ASAM criteria. Step 5, clarify when it must happen. Support services should be initiated as indicated by clinical need. Psychiatric and medical consultation must occur within 8 hours by phone and 48 hours in person. Step 6 is the policy should require that individual records include the date, provider, and outcome for each referral or consultation. Administrative files should contain current affiliative agreements. And yes, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I just saw the question. We're still waiting to put the Q&A together from last month's webinar. So that we are expecting to do by the end of this week as well. Thank you, Christopher, for bringing that up. Okay, step 7 is to ensure the policy reflects the actual practice. So the policy should include mechanisms to ensure staff follow the process, such as training and clinical record reviews. Supervisors should regularly monitor compliance. Policies should be reviewed annually to confirm they still match current procedures and external requirements. So this example demonstrates a strong policy that reflects the expectations outlined in the ASAM criteria for level 2.5 support services, section A. It clearly identifies who is responsible, what services are required, and how access is ensured, including through affiliative agreements or referrals. It includes documentation expectations, oversight mechanisms like annual reviews, and ensures policies align with actual practice. So this kind of detail ensures consistency, it promotes accountability, and it makes the policy both actionable and auditable. So your policy may look like this. It may even look like this. This is a policy of a week example. This is too vague. Any language, as we said before, that is vague should be updated with specific guidelines. It lacks specific timeliness, roles, documentation procedures, and there's no mention of affiliative agreements. Policies like this make it difficult to assess compliance or provide clear direction to staff. When a policy doesn't reflect actual practice, it leaves too much room for interpretation, and it creates gaps in care and confusion. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Vicki again to talk about informed consent.
Thanks, Gloria. So now that we've discussed dimensional emission criteria and supportive services, let's focus on the types of services being offered and how the expectations around these services are documented and communicated. So in the spirit of shared decision-making and using that model, it's imperative that individuals are aware and understand a facility's expectations of their program. Making sure that individuals are aware of the time commitment for services and how these services are delivered is essential to informed consent. How your facility documents informed consent can vary by facility and may be woven through multiple policies or in other documentation. Do the individuals in your services receive a client's bill of rights, which outlines the rights they have in treatment? Do you review the level of care recommendation with the individual upon admission and with any subsequent level of care changes? Do you include the individual in discussions around what group or groups may be most beneficial for them to attend, or do you just assign individuals to groups? Outlined on this slide are the guidelines for service delivery according to the ASAM text for each level of care, moving from the most restrictive at the top at level 4 to the least restrictive at the bottom at level 1. In addition to ensuring policies are reflective of these guidelines and clearly document the range of service hours, facilities should ensure they have enough programming to meet the individual's level of need. So what do we mean when we say this? Essentially, programs want to be able to set up to offer the range of services within the ASAM criteria guidelines. For example, IOP programming should be able to accommodate individuals who need the minimum 9 hours of IOP services, as well as individuals who maybe need 16 hours of IOP services. This is going to be true for all levels of care. Minimum standards may be identified, but individuals may be appropriate for more than just the minimum standard, or if they no longer need that level of service, they may be appropriate to transfer to a lower level of care. And now I'm going to turn it over to Amanda to highlight treatment planning.
Thank you, Vicki. So let's dive into treatment planning. The treatment planning process, according to the ASAM criteria, should be dynamic and adaptable, constantly evolving based on the individual's progress and ongoing assessment across 6 key dimensions. This means treatment planning policy should demonstrate the fluidity of progress in treatment and should provide a roadmap for a counselor in how to develop a good treatment plan. Policies will want to provide the landmarks for the roadmap. For instance, the development of the treatment plan starts with a problem, then creates a goal or a destination of where the client wants to go. Next, it reports the objective, in which there are specific directions to help the clinician and client identify if they are staying the course of the goal. And lastly, it identifies the intervention, or in other words, how the clinician and the client will travel together to sustain progress on the journey. In the next few slides, we will identify the significance areas to include in your policy, which will help in facilitating your treatment planning practice. ASAM defines treatment planning similarly throughout the levels of care with some slight variations of terms. A treatment plan involves problems, needs, strengths, skills, and priority formulation. Short-term measurable treatment goals and preferences are articulated along with activities designed to achieve those goals. The plan is developed in collaboration with the client and reflects the client's personal goals, while considering the capabilities and resources available to achieve the client's personal goals. Treatment plan reviews are conducted at specific times, as noted in the plan, or more frequently as determined by the appropriate credentialed professional. The plan is updated to the frequency relevant to the client's level of stability and severity of illness. The treatment plan reflects case management as needed, conducted by on-site staff or through referral. Treatment plans will include a problem statement and formulation, a description of the individual's problem or reason for seeking treatment in their own words, short-term measurable goals, a statement in the individual's own words identifying the benefit they would like to get from treatment with timeframes and identified benchmarks. Activities designed to achieve these goals, interventions, the services that will support the individual to achieve their short-term measurable goals, such as individual, group, family counseling, drug screening, recovery support engagement, etc. Overall, in any level of care, it is important to ensure that your policies reflect the treatment plans that are being developed in your practice. Main components of your policy for treatment planning should include the plan is individualized, incorporates short-term measurable goals, has collaboration with the client, is reviewed at specific times, and involves case management as needed. A few other key concepts include fluidity, in which the treatment plan is not a rigid document. It's a living guide that adjusts to the client's changing needs and responses to treatment. Progress monitoring, in which the treatment team regularly assesses the client's progress, and don't forget the ongoing six-dimensional assessment is utilized. Licensing has regulations for the minimum standard for when reviews should occur. These regulatory minimums for treatment plan reviews remain intact, although the treatment plan updates can occur more frequently than the regulations require to accurately reflect the client's progress. An example of a structure that you can incorporate into your treatment planning policies and procedures is SMART goals. Counselors are expected to incorporate SMART goals into their treatment plan. SMART goals are a framework designed to help you set clear and actionable objectives. The acronym SMART stands for specific. Goals should be well defined and clear. Measurable. There should be specific criteria to measure progress. Achievable. Goals should be attainable and realistic. Relevant. Goals should align with your broader objectives. Time-bound. Goals should have clearly defined timeline, including a starting date and a target date. When you consistently incorporate a framework like SMART goals into your policies, procedures, and practices, you will guarantee services are high quality, individualized, and sensitive to a person's specific needs. As a reminder, the biopsychosocial is used in guiding the treatment process. The provider ensures that the biopsychosocial is used in guiding the treatment plan. Next, you will see on your screen an example of a treatment plan policy. The goals of the intervention and treatment determine the methods, intensity, frequency, and types of services provided. The clinician's decision to prescribe a type of service and subsequent discharge or transfer of a patient from a level of care needs to be based on how the treatment and its duration will not only influence the resolution of the dysfunction, but also positively alter the prognosis for long-term recovery and outcome of that individual client. Be sure to examine your current practices are in line with your policies regarding treatment plan documentation. When additional alignment reviews are completed at a later date, reviewers will be looking for the connection between policies and documentation. You could choose to do an internal chart audit to see if your charts reflect your policies as a standard practice. As you can see in this example of a chart audit tool, each component of the treatment plan we previously mentioned is incorporated into the tool. Collaboration with the individual, short-term measurable goals, goals in the SMART format, reviewed at specific timeframes, problem statement in the individual's own words, strengths, needs, abilities, and preferences included. And now I will pass it back to Vicki to discuss the golden thread.
Thanks, Amanda. All right, so as with many of our other technical assistance webinars, we wanted to take a moment to highlight the importance of the golden thread. So the golden thread is that interconnection between an individual's biopsychosocial evaluation, treatment plan, their treatment plan updates, and progress notes within their record that are going to tell the story of their recovery. So let's explore this a little bit further on the next slide. Okay. In this graphic, we're demonstrating how a facility's policies, as well as their documentation, can build upon one another. Policies pertaining to the biopsychosocial evaluation will refer to the treatment planning policy, which outlines a facility's approach to treatment planning. The treatment planning policy is also going to refer back to the biopsychosocial evaluation, as the treatment goals are built off of the information as documented in that biopsychosocial evaluation. Policies related to progress note completion may identify how the progress notes tie both the areas identified in the biopsychosocial evaluation to the treatment planning goals, and then document the individual's progress in treatment. All of these aspects together are going to demonstrate the individualization of services. So on the following slides, you're going to find the resources for your reference. We've broken down each slide by level of care and included the links to the service description, self-assessment checklist, and co-occurring guidelines, which you can also find on our website. Additionally, you're going to find the ASAM text references, and this is going to outline the service as well as the treatment planning guidance. So on this slide, we have the level 1 outpatient services, which is outlined in the text on pages 184 to 196. On the following slide, we have level 2 intensive outpatient services, and this is outlined in the text on pages 198 through 207. The following one is level 2.5 partial hospitalization services. You're going to find that in the text on pages 208 to 222. On this slide, we have level 3.1 clinically managed low intensity residential services or halfway house services. This is going to be in the text on pages 222 to 234. Next, we're going to have level 3.5 clinically managed high intensity residential services. Those are outlined on pages 244 to 264. And then we have 3.7 medically monitored intensive inpatient services. Those are going to be outlined on pages 265 to 279 of the text. And finally, we have level 4 medically managed intensive inpatient services, and those are going to be outlined on pages 280 to 290 of the text. And with that, this concludes our technical assistance call for the month of August. We thank everyone who participated today. Please note that our next TA call is scheduled for September 8th. And it's going to take place on the second Monday of the month due to the Labor Day holiday. Thank you again, and we hope everyone has an enjoyable rest of your summer.